Hey everybody, so I just wanted to take you behind the scenes and give you a little bit of a sneak peek and show you the process of how I created this animation that you just saw. So this cat animation was done for a client who has a logo that already exists, and there's a logo reveal animation that happens right before this animation that I did. And so this is not the final version of it. I just chose the neutral gray because it showed off the best, and then I actually exported this with a transparency so that you don't actually see this background, because it's going to be used again with a logo reveal that reveals this logo, and then there may be some other elements on the screen. So let's watch it again. And there it is, and this is an After Effects animation where I used puppeteering to generate this animation. I basically created a bunch of different parts and then rigged it with what's called parenting. Basically, you just assign essentially who's going to follow the leader, and I'll get to that in a minute, and then you animate it almost like puppets, like paper puppets. And so this is the rig for the cat. So the first thing that I did is I had a bunch of reference images for the cats. There were 4 different cats. I'll go ahead and make them appear so you can see them all. And I did create the cat parts, and each of these cats is on a layer, okay? And you can see these ones are not grouped, and these are the different parts. So let's zoom in. So these I illustrated in Adobe Flash, and I created what's called symbols, which are just little graphics, and you could take this graphic and animate it on the timeline, much like you would a puppet animation in After Effects. You can see that basically these are all the same model, but with different colorings and slightly different, shapes, around the head and the body, but mostly the same. I broke it down into what I was going to need for the animation. So this is the one cat whose name is Rocky, and each one of these is an illustrated part. So some of these at this point are still the symbols. These are the symbols that I copied from this, just right over to here. And then some of these are just drawn, like I just redrew them. And so these are the side body parts, basically, that I drew, that I'm going to animate later. And then I took them into Illustrator. And in Illustrator, each one of these is basically in the exact same spot. So what I did is I created artboards. That's what these are right here. And you can see each of these is like a board. See that? And you can export these as individual images. And once I export them, you have all your different parts and pieces, and they're all separate. Coming over to After Effects, here's the animation again. So now you're seeing, okay, those are all the pieces, those are all the drawings that I made, right? Like if we were to zoom in, you can kind of see like, okay, there's the body. That's the same piece that I had in Animate right here, right? And those are all the pieces, and now they're being animated. Yeah, so there's his parts are all right here, and they're moving together. Now, before I did this, I have to actually decide what this animation is going to look like. So before I started animating, I didn't just come in here without a plan and start animating. And I also find that that's difficult for the client, because the client's not necessarily going to know what it's going to look like. So before I did that, I actually animated all of these cats just really roughly in Adobe Animate. So there it is. There's a rough animation of the one. And here's another rough animation. So you can see this is actually how I kind of blocked it out. So this is keyframing, and I feel comfortable enough doing this quickly with drawing, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because I'm not going to use this as the final. It's really just there for timing. I knew that each of these cats had to come out separately. They were each going to have, a couple seconds, 2 to 3 second animation, and so I wanted to be careful that they don't take up too much time, because it's only supposed to be about 6 seconds long. And then the final rough animation I put together, and this is kind of what I came up with. So you see, like up here with the cat that falls asleep, he actually pauses for quite a long time, and that gives the viewer time to like look around before he decides to sit down and take a nap. He goes up, and almost immediately this other cat pops out. He's gonna look over, whoop, and then as he looks over, you see that he's looking at the other two who are kind of goofing off. And then as she's like pushing him back, you'll see that the cat up top starts moving again, but this is probably the most overlapping in terms of animation that I had to have just to get it in there within about 6 seconds. It's basically like 1, 2, 3, 4, and that way your eye just kind of gets to rotate around the wheel, right? And then you look back up. Oh, okay, right. And even if you didn't look back up right away, you would look back up right there, like at least by the time he's laying down. So it works. That's called staging, which is a principle of animation. You want to make sure that it's easy to read. And you can see, yeah, it's basically the same. Actually, all these layers down bottom are the originals. And if you were to go in and look at, let's say this one, for instance, and I were to turn on these bottom layers, you see there it is. And so I actually tracked with, see that in the background? I actually tracked with the rough animation for my timing, and it's basically the same. So let's take a look at this and see what's going on. I'm gonna turn off motion blur for a second. Motion blur is causing this to look really blurry. So let's take a look at this and see what's going on. So in a freeze frame, yeah, her eyes are like popping out, right? In a sense, there's like a lot going on here. So this is the most complicated one. There's 3 parts. I'll just show you really briefly what this looks like. You can see all these layers. I've got 76 layers, but only I think 74 of them, 73 of them are actually being animated. So that's 73 different parts. Each of these parts right here is being animated. Some are more complex than others. Like, so this right here is a simple leg, and I named them. So I got thigh, and I got the bottom one, and then they work their way up. This is kind of a wonky order, but it has to do with how I want them to be displayed. They are attached to one another. So if you look, each of these has what's called a parent link, which means that it follows the other one. So if I grab this one, and I'm just gonna mess with this real quick, and I hit R, and I rotate it, all the other little guys move, okay? But if I grab this one, and I hit R, only the bottom portion moves. And that's because this is parented to this, right? And then these two are parented upward as well. So basically, the paw is parented to the shin, which is parented to this part of the leg, which is parented to the thigh. And so as a result, it follows up the chain, but it doesn't do it in reverse. So then if I rotate this, you know, it doesn't rotate the top parts. And then everything is connected to the body. The body is unique because the body and the tail are actually puppet pins. So what I did for these, you can see each of these has several different puppet pins. Let me show you. So this one has 5. And these are all animated. These are keyframes down here. And each of these is a pin and can be manipulated. And the puppet pin tool is cool because it allows you to stretch and manipulate an image. And so it gives you this ability to kind of create arcs, to create essentially like a spine. And I did the same thing for the tail. The tail is the same. The tail actually has a lot more parts. So you can see all these are different parts of the tail. All of these are the keyframes for the tail. So yeah, there you go. All these are different things. So I animated this as a whole screen so it was nice and big. And then I used that background. I used my sketched out version to actually create the keyframes. And then a lot of the rest of it was just, you know, I mean, I added things like tail whips. You know, you can see the tails kind of whipping around, and I did some different things with movement, you know, where I flipped parts around, and obviously I have the arcs at the back, the things being pushed. You know, that wasn't in the original. This is where I add a lot more detail, but all the timing was, I added a lot with like the ears and the eyes. You know, the ears are kind of always flopping, and they're kind of like hair, where they're always the secondary, or the overlap and follow through actions, you know. And there you go, there you have it. This whole process probably took about 10 hours to do for me, and that's not a lot of time. I mean, if I were working on it non-stop for a whole day or two, I probably could get it done in a couple days. I wasn't working on this nonstop. I had other projects to do, but I did work on it quite a bit, and it took me about a week. So I spread it out over about a week. But yeah, maybe 10 to 15 hours at most. And what's cool is that with this style of animation, if for instance, if the client wanted to do another little whatever, just something simple like for her channel, there's a YouTube channel, if she wanted to do something with the cats again, and they were in roughly the same kind of positioning, like they're in profile basically, like they are here, then I could do that. And because I've already got all the parts, so I wouldn't have to redo that part ever again. I hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes on making of this little animation and seeing all the work that goes into animating stuff. It is a time-intensive operation. It certainly has a lot of value because of that, but also, you know, if you want it to look good, you want to have nice fluid overlapping actions, and you know, if you look at the cat jumping, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. This is about physics and acting performances, you know, it's about getting those nice little bounces. I mean, just really, you want good stuff, you're gonna have to pay for it, and obviously, you know, it's not cheap labor, but I think that it's totally worth it. You get some really cool stuff from it. That's a lot of fun. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next project. Bye y'all, have a good day.